Central Texas. July 1944. The sky is a white blaze, the kind that erases shadow and hums with heat. A truck rumbles across the flat plain, its tires cutting furrows through red dust, approaching a fenced compound that glints in the sun. Behind the wire, 100 men in dull gray stand waiting, caps pressed to their knees. Their uniforms are clean but threadbare, salt-stained from weeks of labor in the fields. The air tastes of metal and dry cedar, and beneath it lingers an almost impossible scent, fresh bread baking somewhere ahead. Private First Class. Eddie Coleman coughs through the cloud of dust as the truck brakes to a halt. He's 21, a cook by assignment, not by passion, but he'd take the smell of onions and lard over the front lines any day. He jumps down, boots thudding against the packed earth, and swings the tailgate open. Wooden crates tumble forward, stenciled U.S. Army rations Type C. He shoulders a box, shoulders slick with sweat, and gestures for 2 guards to lend a hand. A column of heat ripples from the truck's hood, and he mutters, "Feels like the devil's cookshop out here." The prisoners watch him wordlessly. Most are barely older than he is sunburned faces, hollow cheeks, a stiffness in the jaw that comes from discipline, not defiance. They've been told to expect hard labor, thin meals, humiliation. Instead, they stand before a kitchen that smells like harvest festivals once celebrated in towns now reduced to rubble. A few close their eyes against the dizziness of memory. Inside the mess hut, pans rattle. A soldier stirs beans thick with bacon grease. Steam fogs the low windows, cutting soft halos around the sunlight. Above the stove, hooks swing with ladles so clean they throw quick flashes of silver through the haze. To the men outside, those glimmers look like some small proof of civilization still alive amid captivity. A whistle cuts the silence officer's signal for mealtime. The Germans form ranks instinctively, the old order reasserting itself even behind barbed wire. When the gate creaks open, they file in with restrained precision, mess tins held forward like a surgeon's tools. Coleman stands behind the counter, eyes tracing the queue. He ladles thick stew into the first tin, the bacon fat sliding through beans the color of mahogany. Then a wedge of cornbread, golden and coarse, still warm enough to steam. Next to it, coffee so strong its scent alone wakes anyone within reach. The first prisoner, a corporal with a narrow face and the pale eyes of a man who's seen too much, stares at the meal as if unsure it isn't some trick. When he finally speaks, his voice trembles. "So viel Fleisch, so viel Zucker." So much meat, so much sugar. His companions nod silently, expressions dark with confusion. This is food richer than any ration they've tasted since the war began, richer even than what their own generals might now be eating. Coleman notices the disbelief, though he doesn't understand the words. He only sees the way the German's hands shake slightly as he moves away with his plate. For a moment, the guard shack is quiet except for spoons tapping against tin, a private symphony of hunger met with satisfaction. Then a fly buzzes near the stovetop, and somewhere outside, a train whistle floats through the heavy air, long and hollow, a reminder that the war still stretches far beyond this fence. The prisoners eat quickly, but not greedily, as if afraid the feast might vanish if they show too much eagerness. The Americans watch, uneasy yet curious, realizing how thin the line has become between enemy and guest. For both, the meal tells its own story, power measured not in bullets or slogans, but in the astonishing sight of compassion made visible through food. Under the merciless Texan sun, steam rises from the bowls, breath mingles with dust, And the moral irony of the age hangs in the shimmering air, the conquerors feeding conquered men better than they feed themselves. Texas. In the summer of 1944, never truly cools. The mornings begin with a shimmer on the horizon, and by noon the air thickens enough to bend light. Through that haze, Camp Hearn lies almost mirage-like, a patchwork of barracks, guard towers, and vegetable plots rising from the scrubland north of Bryan. Barbed wire divides the red soil into exact squares. Inside, motion follows rhythm rather than impulse. Whistles blow, boots strike gravel, English mingles with German, and the land itself hums with insects and distant engines. The war seems both present and absurdly far. Trains loaded with cotton and army equipment shunt eastward every morning. Farm trucks pass convoys of captured soldiers on the same county roads. Paper flags hang in the windows of family houses, blue stars for sons deployed abroad, gold stars for those who will not return. And in town, women carry ration books like passports, counting the week's sugar stamps with mathematical precision, while gossip floats behind every screen door about those Germans up at the camp. Inside the compound, life organizes itself into a strange civility. Reveille at dawn, inspection, work detail to the nearby fields, lunch at 11 with the precision of a metronome. For men who once marched under the weight of ideology, the new order revolves around routine and survival. They salute at lineup without pride, merely habit. The language of drill has become the language of endurance. The camp itself smells of contradiction. Diesel fumes mix with the sweetness of fresh cut hay. The laundry sheds breathe steam through their vents. Over the barracks hang cloth lines strung with washed uniforms, each patched carefully by hand. Even captivity yields a texture of normal life, and in that texture, curiosity begins to replace hostility. Cultural boundaries drift and blur. The Americans, mostly young, small-town soldiers who joined up after Pearl Harbor, find themselves surprised by the prisoners' manners. The Germans sweep their barracks, plant gardens with geometric neatness, and sometimes hum Schubert while working in the fields. To many guards, the effect is unsettling. They had been prepared for brutes, and instead found men who said "please" in English and mended fences better than the locals. Food remains the daily point of astonishing difference. Each morning, long columns of prisoners march toward the mess hall, boots crunching the same dirt road the guards use. From the kitchen, really an enormous shed fitted with army stoves, drifts a rhythm of preparation. The hiss of coffee urns, the chop of knives, the metallic jangle of ladles against pots. The cuisine owes much to improvisation. Some ingredients come from army depots, others from local farms. Beans and bacon collide with a hint of European technique when the prisoners themselves are allowed to cook. At first, the notion of letting Germans handle food seems outrageous, but soon word spreads. One of the captured men once baked for a hotel in Munich. Another worked in a family cafe near Bremen. Their skill, quietly, earns them an unlikely partnership. The American non-coms supervise while the Germans knead dough, slice onions, or season stew, according to taste unlisted in U.S. manuals. A mutual silence settles over these shared labors, not trust, but the comfort of doing something entirely human. Each stir of the pot becomes a small negotiation between conqueror and captive. Beyond the kitchen and the sweat, camp life has its small theaters of dignity. In the evening, when the day's orders are done, the prisoners gather in neat rows to smoke, trade cigarettes for soap, or show each other hand-tinted portraits from home. Some have begun carving figurines from peach pits. Others tinker with violins built from cratewood and barbed wire strands. Music drifts across the yard, halting and melancholy. The guards listen without comment, eyes fixed on the far light of the watchtower. Outside the barbed wire, resentment simmers. Farmers lament that they cannot buy enough gasoline while enemy soldiers ride army trucks to fieldwork. Newspapers publish pieces defending the policy. It is not mercy, it is law. Still, the irony travels by word of mouth. The prisoners eat heartier than some citizens. Every rumor hardens the paradox until no one can tell whether it is generosity or strategy, compassion or performance. In the middle of this uneasy balance stands Lieutenant Colonel Anderson, the commander with his polished boots and meticulous creed of order. He walks the perimeter at dusk, pipe in hand, and says to his adjutant, "Discipline is simple. You treat a man like a man, or he stops being one. He enforces the rules as if their observance alone will justify the entire experiment that America can prove its strength not through deprivation, but through fairness displayed without apology." For the prisoners, America begins to take on texture beyond propaganda. It smells of cornmeal, oil, and rain on dust. It looks like young sentries rubbing sweat from their eyes and women in floral dresses driving trucks to the cotton gin. This enemy, so feared in Europe's imagining, turns out to laugh loudly and feed abundantly. The Germans exchange glances of disbelief during each meal. If this is defeat, they think, it is a peculiar kind defeat wrapped in kindness, demanding new definitions of power. Night falls soft over the prairie. Frogs begin their pulse in ditches. Inside the wire, lights blink out one by one until only the guard towers glow amber against the dark. Somewhere beyond, a radio hums faintly, with big band swing the music of the victors, drifting effortlessly over fences that now seem less like chains and more like boundaries between worlds, learning, awkwardly, to coexist. The contradiction begins quietly, almost politely, before history sharpens it into a lesson. In the first weeks, astonishment is private, a raised eyebrow over the food tray, a silent inward reckoning. But soon, it ripples through every gesture, every rumor drifting beyond the barbed wire. By September 1944, the war in Europe grinds on. But here in Texas, it manifests as the steady engine growl of supply trucks. Flour sacks, canned fruit, powdered milk commodities. Others can scarcely glimpse pour into the camp's storerooms. Each delivery drives the paradox deeper into the soil. In order to prove civilization, the victors must feed their enemies better than themselves. The camp kitchen buzzes like a factory. American cooks work beside German assistants who chop onions with the precision of surgeons. The prisoners are paid in canteen tokens that buy cigarettes or postcards. Every ritual mimics normal life until, for moments, they almost forget they are captives. Then the sound of the guard's bolt sliding home restores reality. Letters from home bring thin paper heartbreak. Some read of bombed villages or missing relatives. Others describe hunger, the ration lines winding through cities where coal dust covers bread loaves meant for children. One soldier reads silently, then stares at his full plate. He cannot make sense of a world where the defeated starve and the captured grow healthy. He folds the letter back into its envelope, as though closing a wound. Outside the wire, contradiction hardens into discontent. Local newspapers print cautious editorials defending Geneva obligations. Local gossip does not read Geneva. A woman in the grocer's line whispers, "Our boys fight on K-rations while these Huns eat pie." Her remark rattles down the street and into town meetings, into porch talk at dusk. Yet the policy stands. For many Americans, fairness becomes a kind of moral armor, an insistence that cruelty would diminish victory. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson carries that conviction like a flag. His press-creased uniform seems to radiate belief in procedure. He knows if prisoners are fed too little, too harshly, their anger will fester. If too well, resentment brews outside the camp. Between those lines he navigates daily, a bureaucrat of conscience. When a junior officer complains that his family's sugar allotment shrinks while prisoners dine on preserves, Anderson replies flatly, "That's the price of the law we claim to fight for." The Germans observe this and whisper among themselves that Americans worship paperwork, and yet somehow the result tastes of abundance. They begin, late at night, to debate whether democracy's strength lies not in freedom, but in organization fueled by faith that decency can be enforced. It is a notion their schooling never allowed. In early October, rain breaks a month of heat. Mud slicks the parade ground. An elderly prisoner, once a baker in Nuremberg, lugs a sack of flour from storage when an American sergeant waves him inside the kitchen. They knead dough silently, side by side. When the loaves rise, golden and swelling, the sergeant grins and slaps flour from his hands. The old man almost smiles back. Later, he tells his bunkmates that in this moment he glimpsed America's strength. They believe kindness is logistics. Each week brings fresh ironies. At Sunday service, chaplains pray in 2 languages across the same yard, one in vocation to Christ the Redeemer, another to Christus unser Herr. Heads bow under the same sun. For a breath of time, even the wire seems transparent. Then duty reasserts itself, and everyone remembers which side they inhabit. Still, contradictions persist in smaller dramas. A returning guard from Italy, his leg bound in thick bandage, eyes the prisoners with new bitterness. He has seen atrocities firsthand. At mess one morning, he slams his tray down and mutters that feeding "these bastards fine food mocks the dead." Across from him, a German signals to his interpreter and replies softly, "Let the dead rest." We must learn to eat in peace. The guard freezes, as if struck by the plainness of the words. Neither man speaks again, but the room carries their silence like a verdict. By winter, the paradox matures into familiarity. German prisoners plow nearby fields for Texas farmers under guard. Americans pass them coffee in thermoses. Occasionally, someone cracks a joke about the heat being worse than North Africa. Laughter, tentative, crosses the wire like a handshake no one admits making. Then Christmas approaches, and the season magnifies every irony. The local chaplain persuades headquarters to allow a modest celebration, a tree from the nearby pine grove, hand-cut ornaments, a short concert. The prisoners volunteer to bake fruitcakes from saved ingredients. When the day arrives, their song, a carol older than both nations, flows through the night air. Guards and prisoners alike stand still, not out of sentimentality, but stunned recognition. Beyond the ocean, men are killing each other in Ardennes snow. Here, within these fences, men hum the same melody and smell roasting turkey. During the meal that follows, hardened veterans blink against tears. Some think of families under bombardment, others of fallen comrades buried under snow. A few guards, wary of appearing soft, move away and light cigarettes under the eaves. But even they glance back toward the hall, listening to the foreign syllables of grace pronounced before dinner. The moment contains too much humanity to fit any propaganda. When the lights dim, the Germans linger over their plates, unwilling to leave warmth and music behind. They understand now the true humiliation of defeat, to be treated decently by those you were taught to despise. And the Americans, clearing tables afterward, feel a subtler unease that compassion itself can be a weapon, its edge aimed not at bodies, but at conviction. In that winter dusk, The camp glows softly against the surrounding darkness, an island of improbable civility. The war elsewhere rages on, but here it pauses to consider itself. This is the contradiction in motion, the heartbeat of mercy pulsing inside victory's iron body, proof that the moral balance of war can tilt not with gunfire, but with the quiet clatter of silverware in enemy hands. By late spring of 1945, the red earth around Camp Hearn begins to green again. Wildflowers slip through the seams of gravel roads, and the air holds that fragile mix of pollen and dust that means something new is coming. Inside the camp, order remains reveille, lineup, work call, but the rhythm feels looser, like a song nearing its final verse. Rumors run faster than telegrams. Hitler dead, Berlin engulfed, surrender imminent. Some prisoners hardly dare to believe it. To acknowledge the war's end might mean confronting what they fought for and what was lost beyond the battlefields. When confirmation arrives, it does so through static on a radio in the guard hut. The announcer's voice, flat yet trembling, speaks of capitulation. The guards gather silently, hats in their hands. Across the compound, the Germans stand uncertain, neither cheering nor collapsing. Relief carries the shape of weariness. A few men drift to the fences and stare past the wire into the horizon, as if expecting to see Europe materialize there in the Texas light. Days lengthen into a waiting season. Official orders move sluggishly. The prisoners tend gardens, mend roofs, write formal letters home that may never find their way through the ruins. The Americans maintain routines, but their attention is already shifting. News from the Pacific dominates. Victory gardens expand. Families begin to plan reunions. Between soldiers and POWs, an easy manner takes hold, cautious yet unmistakable, born of constant proximity. Eddie Coleman, who started the war frying beans and onions for strangers in gray, now greets the same men by name. He trades half-jokes with them about baseball and trucks. One morning he hands out sandwiches for a work detail, and an older prisoner, formerly a tailor from Cologne, laughs softly and says, "We have all served the kitchen of destiny, yes?" Coleman grins, though he's not sure he caught every word, only the wistful humor underneath. In July, transfer orders arrive at last. The Germans will be sent to East Coast ports, then transported back across the ocean to a homeland no one can clearly imagine. At dawn, convoys form, trucks idling in the thin mist. The men line up in silence. Some clutch wooden figures, some folded sketches of the Texas plains they cultivated. For the first time, the guards seem unsettled, responsible not just for prisoners, but for witnesses to their better selves. Before departure, Coleman and the others prepare one final meal. Nothing lavish sandwiches brushed with mustard, apples, hard-boiled eggs wrapped in paper, but the gesture carries weight far beyond its ingredients. Each departing man receives a bag as he climbs aboard. Many pause, looking down at the food, then at the Americans who hand it over. A few manage crooked smiles. One officer salutes in the old-world way, straight-backed, formal. His words come low and steady. Danke für die Menschlichkeit. Thank you for humanity. When the last truck rattles down the dirt road, dust follows it like a curtain closing. In the empty mess hall, sunlight pools on the long tables. Coleman runs a rag over the counter, though there's nothing left to clean. He leans against the doorframe and listens to the quiet, the sort that carries both relief and ache. The war has moved elsewhere, but its echoes remain here in the smell of coffee grounds and the ghost heat of the stoves. Across America, hundreds of camps mirror this goodbye. Some become storage depots, some return to farmland, some simply vanish beneath subdivisions. Yet traces persist. A concrete step buried beneath grass, a photograph kept in a family box, a rumor of the Germans who baked good bread. Time erases the fences, but not the improbable civility that stood within them. Years later, a few former prisoners write back to the towns that held them. One sends a Christmas card from Stuttgart describing his new bakery. Another encloses a photograph of his children sitting by a window. Inside, on the sill, a small American flag. For the Texans who receive such letters, memory folds into gratitude and a modest pride that decency had not been rationed. They tell their stories quietly, over coffee, how during the darkest war they learned that nourishment could be a form of justice. By the time grass swallows the last post hole, the prairie has reclaimed its shape. Wind sighs where barbed wire once thrummed. All that remains is the idea itself, simple, radiant in its contradiction that a nation can prove its strength not through how fiercely it fights, but through how humanely it feeds. In the lingering heat of a Texas evening, two truths endure. Generosity, even toward an enemy, redraws the moral map of war. And compassion, once offered, does not vanish. It settles quietly, like bread scent clinging to the air long after the ovens have gone cold.